All signs are pointing towards Khamzat Chimaev versus Jared Cannonier. We had Usman come out earlier this week saying that he has no idea what happened to the matchup between him and Chimaev. We also had news of Khamzat Chimaev's coach leaking something on his Instagram story that we're going to go through today that kind of says that his next opponent's going to be Jared Cannonier. And we had Brendan Allen, which we're going to start with, leak accidentally in his post-fight interview after defeating Bruno Silva that maybe Khamzat Chimaev already has an opponent and that Ali Abdelaziz knew about it. So I'm going to go through all of these pieces of evidence. I'm going to put them together to make the conclusion that Khamzat Chimaev versus Jared Cannonier is going to be next. And then we're going to talk about that matchup at the end of the video. But we're going to start straight away here with the interview from Brendan Allen, because this was the first cue, or the first clue, that everyone missed that definitely pointed towards Khamzat Chimaev versus Jared Cannonier. Remember, we don't know who's going to be next for Cannonier. No real matchup makes sense right now in the middleweight division for Jared Cannonier. We know that Khamzat Chimaev is looking for a matchup soon, and that Jared Cannonier offered his services to be a title elimination bout for Khamzat Chimaev after his own performance against Marvin Vettori. I'm going to play you this segment of Brendan Allen's interview where he talks about how he regretted calling out Jared Cannonier in his post-fight speech. Listen up.
And then Jared Cannonier for a contenders matchup. It's a good call out. What do you see in Jared Cannonier that makes you think he's the right guy for you to get that title shot in 2024?
Well, first off, sorry to Ali. He told me not to call anyone out that has a fight or Cannonier because he potentially has a fight from what we understand.
Immediate eyebrows raising to that comment there. As soon as I saw this interview, people told me about this immediately. I didn't even watch this naturally because I'm not scouring YouTube for a Brendan Allen interview in a post-fight situation, but people said, hey, check out Brendan Allen's interview. Go to 1 minute and 38. He mentions that Ali Abdelaziz knows that Jared Cannonier already has a matchup and would be angry about him calling out Jared Cannonier, and that's basically what you just heard right there. I'm going to play it one more time for you guys.
It's a good call out. What do you see in Jared Cannonier that makes you think he's the right guy for you to get that title shot in 2024?
Well, first off, sorry to Ali. He told me not to call anyone out that has a fight or Cannonier because he potentially has a fight from what we understand.
And Ali knows stuff that's going on behind the scenes and is, by the way, the manager of Brendan Allen, which is why Brendan Allen is talking about Ali Abdelaziz, talking to him about who he was going to call out next.
But I already memorized all that stuff, so I was like, shit, I got to go with it. I'm sorry. I'll just have to take the heat later, you know. It's better to ask for forgiveness, so.
And he talks about how now he's going to be in trouble with Ali Abdelaziz because he called out Cannonier, who Ali seems to assume already has a matchup in the works. Then we get an Instagram story from Khamzat Chimaev's coach. This is a very interesting one because he puts up this story, as you can see, on the right-hand side of the screen. This one here that I'm moving around. And it shows on the story Khamzat Chimaev's coach saying, my flight got delayed 4 times this morning. However, I'm not wasting time. Already studying the next opponent for the Boars, Khamzat Chimaev. Which is really interesting because he shows fight footage of a fight that we don't know what it is. But then when you do further investigation, which is why I've got this other image here up on the screen, you can actually see from this image that there is already a matchup for Khamzat Chimaev. So I'm going to show you this at the top here, which is the actual image of the screen. And as you can see, it matches up pretty well with the picture here on the left of the screen as well. As you can see it here at the bottom. Look at that. You can see the angle of the stance of Jared Cannonier here. You can see that there's 2 rounds. It's very hard to tell because of how bright the image is. But you can see at the bottom here that there's 2 rounds out of 3. I don't know if you can faintly see that at the bottom, but you can see that there's 2 rounds out of the 3 completed, and that is the same as this picture here on the left, where there is 2 out of 3 rounds completed as well. We also have other things like this little shot in the background here, which is matching up pretty well with this shot up top with another red circle around it where the lighting is. Then the cameraman in the top right corner, that's the cameraman here, just up on the right. And you can see the Toyota tires. You can match up the sponsors on the canvas as well. The Monster logo underneath their feet. Just the stance of the two of them and how you can see the legs of Gastelum and Cannonier matching up. And we know that Gastelum has a fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. So the only reason his coach would be watching this is because he knows that Jared Cannonier is the next opponent for Khamzat Chimaev. And I believe that's probably going to be next because they need new opponents for Israel Adesanya. I assume that they were looking to book this fight between Cannonier and Chimaev just in case Whittaker beat Du Plessis because, you know, I'm sure they didn't expect Du Plessis to beat Whittaker. Not many people did. But seeing as Du Plessis won, I guess that saved them in the short term for a fresh matchup for Adesanya. But the best thing to do is Khamzat Chimaev, Jared Cannonier. And as you can see, as I've just shown you here between these two images, things seem to match up extremely well. You can see the Modelo down here on the right-hand side by where he's tried to scribble things out. And you can see the Modelo sign here. This coach didn't realize that the internet is a very smart place. And if you show them anything, they'll be able to find something from it. You know what I mean? He thought he was going to get away with just showing this on his Instagram story and thinking that no one's going to notice what fighter it is. But immediately Reddit picked up on it. And we now talk about that matchup. Khamzat Chimaev versus Jared Cannonier. I reckon it's happening. I reckon that's pretty much happening. That's pretty much confirmed. And I don't know what they're going to do about when this is going to happen. I would assume that this fight is going to be taking place in October in Abu Dhabi. It makes all the sense in the world to have Khamzat Chimaev fight in Abu Dhabi. Now, this fight could also happen in September on the Australia card to maybe have a potential backup opponent for Israel Adesanya because Du Plessis is making that short turnaround. However, I don't see this fight being made within the next week. Maybe they announce it soon to sort of cover up Ngannou's news about him fighting Fury, but I don't see them announcing this this week, and I do see them saving Chimaev for the Abu Dhabi card because as of right now, we don't even know if Makhachev is going to be available for that Abu Dhabi card. So, because we don't know what matchup he's actually going to have on that card. So, what I think the UFC is going to do in the first place, before I talk about who I think is going to win this matchup, I think the UFC is going to delay the October pay-per-view card. I can really see them doing that. I think they're going to delay the October pay-per-view card to compete with Francis Ngannou's late October card with Fury, and I think they're going to stack it to the brim with amazing fights. I don't know how that's going to work with them delaying it. I don't know how flexible Abu Dhabi is with that and how accommodating they can be to the UFC to delay it, but I assume they're going to do the UFC a favor. So I imagine the UFC, who hasn't booked a single fight for that Abu Dhabi card, by the way, maybe for a reason, because they were waiting to see when Ngannou was going to come back. I reckon that maybe they're going to delay it till the end of October and do a fight card with maybe, seeing as Oliveira said he wouldn't be ready for the initial date, maybe he'll be ready a few weeks later if he said he was going to be ready in November. So I'm sure they can find some way to appease someone enough to take that fight with Makhachev in Abu Dhabi, because a great way to compete with Fury versus Ngannou would be Makhachev Oliveira 2, Makhachev Volkanovski 2, Makhachev versus the winner of Poirier Gaethje if they make it easy enough, and then have a nice co-main event of Khamzat Chimaev versus Jared Cannonier, maybe even put Yuri Prochazka versus Jamal Hill on that card as well, and stack it top to bottom with amazing matchups that are going to steal the show that weekend instead of Fury versus Ngannou, because although Fury versus Ngannou is big, the boxing problem is there's not going to be anything else big on that card. It's going to be solely reliant on Ngannou and Fury, and I reckon the UFC can very easily compete with that, because I don't think the build-up of Ngannou versus Fury is going to be entirely exciting, because Ngannou's not much of a crazy personality, you know what I mean? It's going to be some talking between the two of them, Fury trying to amp it up a little bit, but I think the UFC can easily compete with it, and this would be a big statement to try and compete with it. Or maybe they just keep the Abu Dhabi card the same and try and bleed the market for money before Ngannou fights Fury. So the weekend before, they keep the Abu Dhabi card where it is and just get people to buy, so they don't have money for next weekend to buy the pay-per-view for Fury versus Ngannou. So I reckon that's what they're going to do. In October, Chimaev versus Cannonier. Who do I think wins the matchup? I'm going to have to go with Khamzat Chimaev, because I know Jared Cannonier looked good against Marvin Vettori, but welterweight striking and middleweight striking are two very different things. Very, very different things. And I think Khamzat Chimaev, who may not be technically sound at welterweight, and where you can say he's a great striker for the welterweight division, I think maybe his technique is going to look a little bit better in the middleweight division in comparison to the welterweight division, where everyone's got pretty good technique. Middleweight is a massive drop-off in talent compared to welterweight. So, you know, I mean, look at the top guys at middleweight. I mean, Whittaker's been a top guy for a long time. Not now, of course, sadly enough, but He moved up to middleweight, had a ton of success. And I think this is going to be a big thing for Khamzat Chimaev. I think he's going to have a ton of success moving up. I like the idea of him not draining weight for once because he does cut a lot of weight. And, that would be good for a fighter to finally not cut that much weight. And also his most dominant performances in the UFC were at middleweight, where he flatline KO'd Gerald Meerschaert, who, although isn't the best in the world, is still beating some capable prospects in that middleweight division. So to smoke him in the first round is very, very impressive at least. And the Cannonier matchup, man. Brunson dropped Cannonier in round 1 and nearly choked him out in round 1. And Cannonier, although comfortable in the choke position at the time, was in real danger at the end of that first round and then came back in the second on a gassed out Derek Brunson, because Brunson, after decades of training, has 5 minutes of cardio. So I think this is going to be a good one for Chimaev. Jared Cannonier is very flexible. He can defend very well off of single legs and double legs, and he's got really strong hips. But I can definitely see Khamzat Chimaev not going for the single legs and double legs, and instead doing what he's been doing to Gilbert Burns early in their fight. Of course, we'll talk about this in a second, but what he did to Gilbert Burns at first in their first fight, or their only fight in the first round of their fight, taking him down by getting the back position, getting the body lock around the back, and then dragging him down to the canvas. He did the same thing to Li Jingliang. He got round to the back, then picked him up and dunked him on the canvas. He's done it over and over again in his career. He did the same thing to Kevin Holland. He shot in, took the back, dragged him down towards the canvas. I don't think this is going to be a guy just shooting single legs and double legs on Cannonier. I think this is going to be a guy getting to Cannonier's hips against a cage and taking him for a ride. And middleweight jiu-jitsu is just not the same as Gilbert Burns jiu-jitsu at welterweight, is it, defensively? So I don't see Cannonier having any answer off of his back. Now, if Chimaev cannot take Cannonier down, he is in a world of trouble. Not a crazy amount of trouble where he's going to get KO'd at any moment with one shot, because we've seen guys like Strickland go 5 rounds with Cannonier and do pretty good, and Strickland's striking is interesting to say the least. But I do think there is danger for Chimaev here if he can't get the takedown. But Vettori was wobbling Cannonier in that first round. You know what I mean? It's not like Cannonier's got this granite chin. Vettori does not hit hard for a middleweight, and he was catching Cannonier early on with some pretty good shots. I think combined with the takedown threat for Khamzat Chimaev, he's going to have a much better time at landing on the feet in the very first round, because I know for a fact Cannonier's going to be thinking, just stuff the takedown, just stuff the takedown, don't let him get you down, because he knows he's got middleweight jiu-jitsu. You're not going to see a Cannonier latch up an armbar from off his back, or a triangle in any way. You rarely see that in the middleweight division, guys getting subs off their back. I mean, Andre Muniz was doing it, but very rarely do we see that type of situation. So I reckon this is going to be a win for Khamzat Chimaev. I would have loved to have seen another matchup. I mean, I would have much rather Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa, or Khamzat Chimaev, Sean Strickland even, just for the build-up of it. It would be way more fun if they could do it that way, or even Khamzat Chimaev, Kamaru Usman at welterweight. But if this is the matchup they're doing, I understand, because Jared Cannonier is back with momentum as a top contender in the middleweight division, coming off a huge win against Marvin Vettori, so his name's bigger than ever. And even though there isn't going to be a crazy fun build-up between the two of them trash-talking or getting wild and having interactions at the press conference and stuff like that, I reckon there is going to be that worry for fans of Chimaev that maybe Cannonier could catch him, because he is strong, he has got decent takedown defense. I just don't think it's good enough to deal with the grappling of Chimaev, who, by the way, if he hasn't been injured, is going to have just made a year of improvements as a young fighter in his career. You know, I was complaining about the layoff, and I am complaining about the layoff. It's really annoying that he's been out for this long, and it's definitely some kind of USADA suspension or visa issue that he had from hanging around with Kadyrov. I am standing on that. I do believe that there is something beyond him just being out for a year. But if he's known about middleweight for a while, he's had time to bulk up, put on some size to build himself into a middleweight, and he's a younger fighter who at the end of the day is going to make crazy improvements over this time. So hopefully he brings those improvements into the fight against Cannonier. And again with Cannonier, although he looked good against Vettori, I knew he was going to look good. Vettori's very basic. He nearly lost to Roman Dolidze on the feet, and Dolidze couldn't even touch Hermansson on the feet. So that was a sign to me that Vettori ain't got it no more, and I'm worried about him in the Cannonier matchup, and I was proven right by that. But at the end of the day, Cannonier is getting older and older, so time is always on Chimaev's side here. And he did just go 5 rounds. Although he won that 5-round fight, Cannonier just went through a training camp for a 5-rounder, so the quick turnaround isn't ideal for him as an older fighter. So we'll see how it goes. I think Chimaev will be able to get this to the ground and out-grapple Jared Cannonier. But if not, Cannonier gets a title shot, I guess. And the good thing about this is that no matter what, the winner gets a title shot, right? Jared Cannonier, if he wins this one, he's in position to get a title shot. Maybe one more afterwards if Adesanya does beat Duplessis. But, you know, if Duplessis beats Adesanya, I see them doing a rematch anyway. So maybe Cannonier, you know, although he would be more deserving than any other contender for beating Khamzat Chimaev to get a title shot, maybe they will have to give him one more afterwards. Maybe they set up a Sean Strickland rematch because of how close that first fight between them was. But I do think Chimaev's going to win. They could do this on the September pay-per-view. They could rush it to that level and make sure the September pay-per-view is amazing. But I think there's so much risk that the October pay-per-view might not be the best that they've got to put it as like on that card. Because we don't even know if Makhachev's going to be there yet. So we definitely need at least a Chimaev to carry some interest into that card. So I reckon they're going to do it in October. Maybe even delay the October pay-per-view to match up with Fury versus Ngannou, which I think could blow it out of the water if they do make a good enough card, because I don't think there's going to be much anticipation. There's going to be anticipation for Fury and Ngannou, but it's not going to be like super fight, crazy pay-per-view level, like million pay-per-view sales. It won't be that level. I reckon Fury and Ngannou does about maybe 500k, and the UFC's got to build a card in October that can compete with that. And I think they will. And I think if they do compete with it, maybe we could see Fury and Ngannou do about 250, 300k. Who knows? If they leave that weekend wide open or don't make a great pay-per-view the week before, Fury and Ngannou's going to do quite well, because that's going to be the fight card of October. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I just gave you all the clues as to why I think they're doing this next. I feel like everyone's on the same wavelength, but sometimes you need these videos to put it all into one place so everyone's on the same boat. It's looking like Chimaev Cannonier. All of the signs are pointing towards it. And I love the matchup. See you later. Goodbye.